Hello everybody. Today we'll discuss about externalizing the configuration that is now within the application itself. So we developed a couple of microservices, or rather one microservice so far, the configuration for which is now residing in YAML files within the application or the microservice itself. When we go to a distributed system in the cloud, we need to externalize this configuration and also make it environment specific so that when you move from your local box development to QA to cloud, you can easily change this configuration uh, without modifying your actual code. So that is the objective of this exercise. We'll be using Spring Cloud Config server to achieve this. Fundamentally, the configuration would now reside in Git repositories, separate Git repositories, which are created to hold the configuration of the applications. And whenever the services run, the configuration will be pulled from these Git repositories. So let's delve into more details. So to achieve this, what we've done here is we've created a repository which holds the configuration of the individual microservices. So let's go and see that repository. Not this. So I've created a repository called application configuration, which holds the configuration for different microservices. So far we have just one microservice, which is a catalog service. So if you go into the catalog service YAML, it defines different profiles, which is corresponding to different environments that we intend to deploy our application in. So we have a profile by name development. We have a profile by name cloud. So the development profile, it has configurations for the Mongodb connection and any other configuration that we might require. So here let's look at the Mongodb configuration. It uses localhost and 27017 port for Mongodb connection properties. Whereas when you reach the cloud, it's looking for an environment variable for host and port, which could be passed in via environment variables. So we have two different profiles set up for catalog service. Nav, this is a Git repository where we hold the configuration. Now we need a configuration service, a server which hosts or which serves this configuration. For that, we created an application called config service. The key thing that we have here is the Spring Cloud Config Server dependency. So we've added a dependency to Spring Cloud Config Server, and then we have a main class, as with any Spring Boot application. It is a Spring Boot application, and it has been made a configuration server by adding this annotation enable config server, which comes from Spring. That's also this config server. So it has a resources properties file where you've configured the git URI to fetch the application configuration from. There are several approaches to configuring git URIs. You could go for a separate repository for each application, or a separate repository for each environment, etc. But here I've gone for a single application configuration Git repository, so the one that we discussed a while ago. So that is configured here under Spring Cloud Config Server Git URI. So your Git repository from where you need to pull the application configuration that is configured here. So Now let's go ahead and run this application, the config service. So we are inside the config service, and now I run this as a Gradle application. So as you can see, I've configured it to start on port 8888, and there are quite a few endpoints that are being configured, but the ones of our interest are the endpoints where these configurations are being served. So let's have a look at it from the browser. So we go to the browser, localhost 8888 is where we have our config service running. And we are looking for, say, the cloud configuration for catalog service. So this is how you access it. So for catalog service, what is the configuration when you're in the cloud environment? So that is what I'm fetching here. So you can see the cloud-based configuration as we've seen in the configuration for catalog service. So whatever was configured here in the cloud is being returned. If you switch over to development, you'll see the MongoDB host and the port changing to localhost 27017, which is as per the configuration that we've done in this property file for development profile. So we verified that the catalog or the config service is able to serve the configuration in an environment specific way based on the profile that we pass in. Now let's go ahead and modify our individual microservices to leverage this config service so that the configuration gets pulled from the config service. So let's go ahead and modify the catalog service to make use of this. So we go into a catalog service application where we had our property file or the YAML file which had the catalog services configuration. We made some adjustments here. We added the new profiles. We've made a default here, but we've added a couple of new profiles, which is the development and the cloud, and both of them just say that the URI to fetch this configuration is at localhost 8888. I've given an environment property here just in case when it moves to the cloud we need the config service also to be hosted on the cloud, and then the host and the port changes there. So we could override the localhost and 8888 with environment variable values. So otherwise, in local development, your configuration URI is going to be localhost 8888. So that's the only configuration change, or rather there's one additional dependency that we need to make here, which is the one here. We are saying cloud spring cloud starter config. Notice that it's not the server. So in config service, config services build.gradle, we had said spring cloud config server, whereas in the client applications which consume it, we say it is spring cloud starter config. So these are the only changes. Your property files were changed, or your YAML file was changed to use the config server URI, and the dependency for spring cloud starter config was added. Those are the only two changes that we need to make to this application to leverage the config service. Now let's go ahead and start this catalog service once again. So we have a config service running and serving the content. Now we need to start the application in a given profile. So let's choose the profile that you want to run in. Okay, I think it's already running. Let me terminate the audit. Okay, so So here I'm going for the development mode of the application. So I'm passing the environment variable Spring profiles active. So that's how you pass the profile environment variable into boot run. So you're saying Spring profiles active is equal to development, and then you're asking Gradle to run the boot run. So we are running the catalog service here. Okay, so there's some errors. That's because I've not run the MongoDB instance here, but let's look at what is of interest. If you can see here, fetching config from the server at localhost 8888, which is our config service. And then it shows that it's pulling the profile development. And where is it pulling it from? It's pulling it from GitHub applications configuration.git. That's our repository, catalog service.yaml. So it's pulling that configuration all the way from Git now, which is served by config service. And the profile that is active is the development profile. So you can notice that the connection properties for MongoDB are localhost 27017, which is as expected, which is as configured for the development profile in the Git repository, which holds the configurations. Similarly, if you boot the same application in the cloud profile, you'll notice that it gets pulled from the configuration that is set up for cloud. So there are some environment variables missing, so that's why it didn't boot, but we can see that it's again fetching it from localhost 8888, which is our config service. The profile that it's looking for is cloud, and it's fetching it from the same source, which is the Git repository's cloud catalog service YAML, and it's looking for the cloud profile value. So the profile that is active is cloud, and it's fetching the cloud profile value. So if you go here, this is what the configuration that we are pulling from. Okay, so thus we have externalized the configuration of our microservice into a separate Git repository, and it's being served by a configuration service. So that concludes this episode. Hope you enjoyed the video. Look forward to other steps in building this e-commerce application using microservices. Thank you very much.